Frank J. Avella here with the Contending. Jiří Mádl's ambitious, epic, and emotionally enveloping third feature, Waves, is set against the backdrop of the Prague Student Rebellion of 1968, right before the Warsaw Pact invasion of Czechoslovakia, where a group of intrepid journalists at Czechoslovak radio were courageous enough to take a daring stand. The film is Czechia's international feature Oscar entry. Welcome, Jiří.
Hi.
Years, I love this film because it manages to shed light on an important event in history, which is way too timely here in my country. But it's also an intimate story about family and the choices we're forced to make.
Right.
I wondered what motivated you to want to tell this particular story.
That's interesting because actually I got this as an assignment at the university where I didn't attend the school properly. So I got as a punishment I got to read this book about the history of Czechoslovak radio, and there was this little chapter which like created a gap in a history timeline, and I didn't know about the group of journalists, and I somehow felt that there is something that maybe was supposed to be hidden. And then I found out that it really was a hidden story, and that the communists later, the Soviet Union, they erased all the records of these journalists. And I thought this story is too huge to remain buried for good.
Wow. And it took you like over a decade to actually get it made, right?
Yeah, it was like a decade. Yeah, right.
That's crazy. I read your inspirations for the film were Argo and Good Night and Good Luck, but I have to tell you,
Right?
I saw elements of Scorsese in your film. Also, there were a couple 70s thrillers that came to mind, like All the President's Men and The Parallax View, both Pakula films.
Okay.
Can you speak to a little bit more on your filmic inspirations?
Yeah, like my very first inspiration was Good Night and Good Luck because I thought this would be a great low budget movie, like in 3 rooms, maybe to make it just in the radio. But then it started growing because the more I knew about it and the more I knew about the turmoil in the streets where the crowd of people was actually trying to defend the radio building against the tanks. All of a sudden I started to see it as a huge film of a big budget film that really like with a huge production value. But and then I bumped into Argo that I liked very much, and I thought there are some similarities between these two films, which helped me to find something in between. And I love the camera work in Argo, and I like the beautiful depiction of the life in the newsroom and how fragile the people are when they really risk everything they have when they go against a huge power. And I thought this is not only a huge war film, but also very intimate one.
Very, very much so. And, it just proves sort of like everything old is new again. Unfortunately, we don't seem to learn from history because the parallels with the world today, it's terrifying.
It is. But I it's unfortunately too timely. It was not my plan because just as you know, I started 2012 or something, and back then the world seemed to be quite all right. And but this what happens, especially in the Ukraine, and as the dictatorships are getting more confidence, maybe it is time to remind us what there was in the past. Maybe all the more for that.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I'm curious about the footage, the actual footage that you use because you merge them pretty seamlessly into the film, even though we know that they're footage from the 1960s. How did you decide on what footage to use?
Mm, it took me a long time. It took me like 3 months really going through the archives because we had so much material. We're lucky to bump into material that wasn't used yet. And the way I chose the right material, it was always only based on a screenplay that had existed before I got into the archives. So I was only like looking for specific scenes where the archive can help me. And then the only job I needed to, or the only work I needed to add to it was to confuse the audience, meaning like that you use a certain archive footage and you make a close up in it so that it feels seamless and that the audience uh, stays connected to the story emotionally and stop thinking, oh, okay, is this an archive or not? And I think there's only one or two shots when it's 100% clear it is an archive, but the rest seems like it's working the way we want it.
No, no, I feel it did very much so. Can you speak a little bit about the Czech film industry and getting this film made?
That's a very good question. I think we're in a very hard position, honestly, because like we're not the booming country if it comes to cinema, and you can see it in the festivals. We haven't had much of a success recently. But I believe that it's quite a complicated situation because we have a lot of mm, big films that are made here with Czech crews. That means the crews are very experienced and there's nothing they wouldn't be able to do. But the Czech market and is very limited, and we're actually finding hard to find a position. But it's getting much better in the last 5 years, and I'm hoping that it that whenever there comes a success of a national uh, cinematography like in film industry, it always has to come in waves. I mean, like, I mean, not only, yeah, why not in waves? But I mean, it's never a single shot film that would make it. I think that people need to start to understand that there is something going on in that country if it comes to films, and then a certain success, a certain attention is possible.
I That's funny what you said about waves. Did you get any pushback about making the film?
Yeah, it was like 5 years ago that we started raising money, and people said that no one's interested like in this topic anymore, and we there were a lot of rejections, and also we got some threats that because there's some still some Russian impact in our country that doesn't want to see a film like this that only reminds people or maybe shows the methods that they have been using for years. And the fact that we put it to light certainly is something that some powers, let's say, dislike. And also, like domestically, it was very difficult because this film is very expansive. Like for our film industry, it's very specific and like 5 times more than an average production. So once you want to really get the money, you have to prove it. So what we needed to do was to shoot a lot of tests, like this thing with archive and the original footage. We need to make tests. We needed to show it to people because somehow it the way to the screen like was very difficult, and maybe that's why it took us 10 years. Interestingly enough, the war in the Ukraine that made us very sad, and it's tragic what's going on there, but it actually helped the film somehow because people started to understand how timely it is and how much the world needs this kind of film. I'm not saying specifically just only waves, but that the world needs to to have a better memory, I would say.
Very much so, because we're living in a time where I don't even know if people can, recall back to the 1968, the 1970s, where journalism and journalistic integrity actually mattered. And we knew what real news was versus
Mm.
today, where we can't tell the difference between real news or fake news because of social media and what appears on our feed and what we see as news.
Yeah,
It was a very different time. I mean, I can't even imagine it. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Um, so I wanted to ask you about finding your two leads, especially the two young brothers. They were fantastic and they're fairly new to acting. Is that true?
Right. Right. Yeah, it took us a lot of time to cast the whole ensemble, but to cast the brothers, like, let's start with Tomáš, the main protagonist. I had a certain idea who I'm looking for, and Wojciech Wrochocký, the lead actor, he was one of the first candidates who actually came to the casting session, and I was surprised because all of a sudden I saw it in him, and I was thinking like it shouldn't go like this. It shouldn't be like the second candidate who comes into the room. So we let him wait for a year or so that we were looking for others, and I really wanted to make sure that we have the very best one. And then, only then, we could start to search for the brother. Because, of course, this is all based on the main protagonist. And like casting a brother to him means like he has to maybe look alike. He needs to be some energy that they have in common, and also something that contrasts these two. And that was difficult. I can tell. Like also at this age, it's very hard to find an actor. We have like conservatory schools, and you can find some, but there are not like crowds of young actors. So it was difficult, but we were lucky enough. I think the final decision came when I saw them together, when I saw them by the table and were rehearsing the very first scene when we see them in the movie, and then we tried one of the final scenes because the film starts in the kitchen and ends in the kitchen, but the idea is to see two different people in these framing scenes. And once I saw that it's working, I was sure it must be the two of them.
You uh you choose there's a very interesting, and I don't want to give much away, but there's a very interesting shot that you use that's from the point of view of the gas stove, uh which was so fascinating to me because it really kind of brought the film together in I thought a really powerful way. Was that always in your screenplay? Was that always what you were planning on doing?
Yeah, it was always in the screenplay, but honestly, initially it wasn't stove, it was a fridge. But then I changed it to the stove, but it had a slightly different role in completing the message of the film. But and it also worked well, but I don't want to give away too much. But for the audience, yeah, they were like somehow it was already in the screenplay.
And the choice of music in the film is absolutely fantastic. I'm curious about getting the rights to the songs, and were there any songs that you wanted that you couldn't get the rights to?
I think there was like one that was simply too expensive for us. But some of the songs, it kind of surprised us that the clearance of the songs was actually not that expensive. We simply knew, and my producer Monica Cristo, who is like a 100 million producer, she understood that the music is essential for the movie, especially for the movie who speaks about the radio and about journalists who in the communist era were lucky enough to see the outside world. So once they come back, they are bringing the colors and they are bringing the world, which means they also need to bring the world music. So there was no way that there would be just Czech music, but then we combined it and it somehow worked. It was very important to me, but I think like I was lucky to have the producer that I had because I don't think there would be many Czech producers that would invest so much money in the music.
Hmm. Well, another thing that I think really, really works with this film is you tell this very specific story happening in an Eastern European country, a political story, but you managed to make it accessible to Western audiences, um, without really spoon feeding, but I felt like I didn't need to run to my Wikipedia page. And
Okay.
that's not an easy thing to do. Was that always
Okay.
your intention?
It was, and I'm glad that you were saying this. It was. I wanted to focus on two things. I wanted to make like clear domestic product that is a good export. So I always kept in mind, okay, international audience, and not only that, another thing I kept in mind was
Mm.
young audience, because they are very specific and their attention span is so short, and I simply wanted to attract them. And what surprised me the most is that we're having really good box office in the Czech Republic, and it's like 50% of it are the youngsters, are like from 16 to 20, and I'm amazed. It's amazing, and they have like their special events that are somehow connected to the movie, and when they have like a costume party, they dress as the journalists from the movie, and I'm so moved by that. It's amazing.
That's fantastic. And I think we underestimate the younger audiences because whereas
So
they do
yeah,
have,
I agree.
yeah, they have these small attention spans, sure, but they'll sit through Oppenheimer too. So,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Just don't underestimate them, they're not stupid. They have different world, but they are still people. They have emotions. That's what I think. Yeah.
uh,
You just need to entertain them. I always say, yeah, like when I teach at the university sometimes, I always say audience is not your mom or it's not your friend. Audience is your enemy. Treat them like an enemy. It means you need to entertain them at every single minute, because these youngsters, they go away. Their attention span is so small, so they go away. So I wanted to make it as dynamic as possible so that they wouldn't yeah, lose their attention.
well, I think in part of that was getting the period right, and you did that, which could not have been easy.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm so glad. Thank you.
How does it feel to be the international uh, feature Oscar entry for Czechia?
Well, yeah, I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled. We already had some screenings in LA, and I know that there are countries who can afford many more screenings and much bigger campaigns. But from what I saw, is that our chances are definitely not small, which fills me with some enthusiasm. And my intention was to make as good film as possible and bring the truth and authenticity about the history. So I don't want to really like too many ambitions to get in my way. So I don't want to think about it too much. But of course, I want to hold the Oscars in my hand. So it's very confusing. So I keep promoting the film, but at the same time, I'm trying to enjoy the fact how the audience reacts. That's the important thing for me.
No, it's understandable. And we see year after year often, the same countries, basically making the short list. But there are also a handful of countries that you don't expect to make the short list that do. And I think
Yeah.
it's about getting the word out there. I think if people see this film, if Academy members see this film, it will make the short list. I've seen now 66 of
Hmm.
the international features, and for me, this is one of the best.
Really?
Yes.
Frank, I'm so glad. I'm really so glad. Thank you.
Yes. Yes, I mean that. So what's next for you?
What's next? Interesting. I need to spend some time with my son, who is like turning 2 years old soon, and he was basically born with the waves. So I think I owe him some time. And then another project. I have something in my mind. I have like three topics that I would like to develop, but I'm also open to like accepting someone else's screenplay and like directing it. I don't know. Let's say I'm the seeker now. I'm in search of material.
It makes complete sense. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time out to speak with us, and I
Thank
wish
you.
you real great success with this film here in the United States. For any word on distribution?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, well, fingers crossed.
Thank you so much. Thank you
Thank you.
very much. Really, I
Thank,
appreciate it.
thank you.